4 pennies, struck in different years, each carrying a mistake the mint never meant for the public to see. From 2006's subtle flaw to 2017's shocking mishap, they slipped quietly into circulation, unnoticed by millions. But for the sharp-eyed collector, these aren't just 1-cent coins, they're tiny jackpots hiding in plain sight. The question is, would you recognize one before you spend it? The year 2006 was an unremarkable one for the Lincoln cent, at least, that's what the U.S. Mint's record suggested. Billions of 1-cent coins rolled off the presses at Philadelphia and Denver, each bearing the familiar copper-plated zinc composition, the Lincoln Memorial reverse that had been in place since 1959, and the sharp, forward-facing profile of Abraham Lincoln himself. On the surface, there was nothing to suggest that this particular year would yield anything out of the ordinary. The mint was well into the era of high-speed, computer-assisted production, with sophisticated quality control designed to catch even the smallest deviation. Yet somehow, a small number of coins escaped those watchful eyes, carrying with them a flaw so subtle, and so intriguing, that it would later ignite excitement in the collecting world. The circumstances of 2006 were important. Copper prices were climbing, but the cent's composition had long since shifted to copper-plated zinc to reduce costs. The mint's presses were operating at full throttle to meet demand, producing hundreds of millions of cents in both Denver and Philadelphia. With such a staggering volume, even a minuscule error rate meant that a handful of defective coins could find their way into circulation. What made this error different, however, was not just its occurrence, but the way it slipped into the hands of an unsuspecting public, and how its true nature would only be revealed much later. One of those coins ended up in the change jar of a collector who, at the time, was looking for wheat cents and early memorial issues. Sorting through a stack of dull copper-colored coins, he almost overlooked it. At first glance, it appeared to be just another worn penny, but a faint irregularity caught his attention. The 2006 date seemed stretched, the 0 slightly distorted, as if the metal had flowed unevenly during striking. Turning the coin under a lamp, he noticed something else. The letters in Liberty were doubled, faint ghost images trailing each character. His pulse quickened. A double die? Machine doubling? Or something else entirely? He placed the coin under a magnifier and traced the details. The doubling wasn't uniform, parts of the design were crisp, others hazy, with a kind of waviness that suggested a misaligned hub strike. There was also a faint seam along the rim, almost imperceptible, as though two planchets had fused unevenly. That was unusual. He began to suspect that this was no ordinary strike anomaly, but a more complex minting error, possibly involving a misfeed or planchet imperfection before striking. He didn't tell anyone right away. Instead, he slipped it into a small paper envelope, labeled it Strange 2006, and began researching. Hours turned into days as he combed through online forums, auction archives, and error coin references. Most 2006 Lincoln cents were mundane, with minor die chips or plating blisters. But here and there, he found whispers of similar coins, centers slightly off, doubling in unexpected places, a strange weakness in Lincoln's coat. Some were attributed to late-stage die deterioration, others to improper die setup. None matched his coin exactly. When he finally shared images on a collector's forum, responses flooded in. Some dismissed it as mechanical doubling. Others swore it was a rare form of hub doubling caused by a misaligned press during the initial die creation. A few sharp-eyed experts pointed out that the rim flaw could indicate a partial collar strike, a condition where the coin isn't fully seated in the collar during striking, leading to subtle distortion. The combination of doubling and collar irregularity was almost unheard of for a 2006 cent. The first offers came quickly. Someone offered $25, another $40. For a coin that had cost him a single cent, this was remarkable, but he hesitated. Something told him its value was far from realized. Months passed, and word of the coin spread in niche collector circles. Similar examples began appearing in online listings, some selling for over $100, especially those graded by PCGS or NGC with error designations. Auction records showed steady growth in interest, with prices climbing as awareness increased. Over the years, the 2006 cent error developed a reputation. While not as flashy as off-center strikes or broad strikes, it had an elegance, a hidden complexity, that drew in error specialists. Its doubling was inconsistent, almost like a whisper of the design's ghost, and its rim flaw suggested a fleeting moment in the press when everything aligned imperfectly. Collectors speculated about the cause, perhaps a slightly loose die during hubbing, or a misaligned collar paired with slight die rotation. Theories varied, and the mystery only added to its charm. The coin's market value reflected this slow-burn fascination. Initially, raw examples might fetch $20 to $50. By the early 2010s, certified high-grade examples, especially those with strong doubling, were drawing $150 to $200. Then came a turning point. A well-preserved specimen graded MS67 red with prominent doubling across, "In God We Trust," and a clear partial collar sold for over $600 at auction. This sale lit a fire, and within months, more collectors were actively searching bank rolls, hoping to find another. The unexpected twist came when a retired Mint employee, speaking at a numismatic conference, mentioned that in early 2006, one of the Philadelphia presses experienced a minor misalignment issue during a production run of cents. The problem, he explained, was quickly fixed, but not before a small batch of coins struck during the incident made it into circulation. He didn't specify numbers, but based on die wear patterns and known finds, experts estimated the population could be fewer than a few hundred in high grades. That revelation confirmed what many had suspected: the error wasn't random. It was the product of a fleeting mechanical flaw in a high-volume production environment. For our collector, the twist was both satisfying and bittersweet. He had, unknowingly, been holding a tangible fragment of that brief mint mishap in his hands for years. Offers now regularly crossed into four figures for pristine examples, especially those with certification and photographic provenance. His original coin, though slightly circulated, carried a personal history that made parting with it difficult. In the end, he chose to keep it, not for its monetary value, but for the thrill it represented. Every time he looked at it, he saw more than copper-plated zinc. He saw the moment a precision machine faltered, the patience of a careful searcher, the growing hum of interest in the collecting community, and the undeniable truth that even in the most modern of minting eras, imperfection could still slip through and become a treasure. And perhaps that's why this small, flawed cent, born in 2006 and rescued from obscurity, continues to hold a place of quiet reverence among those who understand just how much a single coin can tell. Under the bright, even glow of a well-lit minting floor, countless copper-plated zinc blanks clinked and rattled their way toward the presses in 2010. It was the first full year after the dramatic reverse design change of the Lincoln cent, a new shield replacing the familiar Lincoln memorial. This shield was meant to symbolize unity, strength, and the preservation of the Union, echoing back to Lincoln's own vision. The U.S. Mint had invested in precision and quality, determined to roll out millions upon millions of flawless coins for circulation. Yet, somewhere in the meticulous process, as blanks were fed into presses at lightning speed, a small and almost imperceptible slip occurred, one that would ripple into the hands of an unsuspecting public. The presses thundered, dies slammed down, and a mistake was struck into existence. A decade later, under the muted light of a kitchen table lamp, a collector shuffled through a handful of coins from pocket change. The evening was quiet, just the faint hum of a refrigerator in the background. The routine was simple: glance, check, discard. Then, something caught the eye. At first, it seemed almost unworthy of a second look. A common 2010 cent, just another modern penny with its copper sheen dulled by the world. But habit is the collector's secret weapon, and habit made the hand pause. The date looked fine, the portrait of Lincoln as sharp as expected, but the shield on the reverse seemed different. The top arc felt slightly off, as though a faint doubling hugged the edges of the lettering. E pluribus unum appeared almost ghosted, with an extra ridge of metal clinging to each letter like an echo. The collector leaned closer, squinting, the fine details sharpening into focus. A quick grab for the loop confirmed it: the doubling wasn't the result of post-mint damage. This was crisp, machine-struck doubling, an error born not from circulation wear, but from the moment of creation. A double die, perhaps, or a dramatic die deterioration that left raised distortions on the coin. Whatever it was, the heart quickened. For days, the coin stayed at the edge of the desk. The collector researched late into the night, comparing photographs, studying mint reports from 2010, reading about shield cent die pairings. While some errors from that year had been catalogued, this one seemed under the radar. It was possible others had seen it and dismissed it. And therein lay the magic: rarity often hides in plain sight. At first, the coin had little market value. In online forums, similar shield cent errors sold for just a few dollars. But markets are fickle things, especially in numismatics. Once attention shifts, prices can move like quicksilver. The collector watched with fascination as listings began appearing, first sporadic, then in small clusters. Prices doubled, then tripled. A few sold at auction for over $50. For a coin most people wouldn't bend to pick up from the sidewalk, it was astounding. As the years passed, demand outpaced supply. The combination of the shield design's novelty and the error's clean visibility to the naked eye pushed the coin into a different category, one sought by both error specialists and Lincoln series completionists. The story of its minting made it even more desirable. The 2010 cent had been struck at both Philadelphia and Denver, each producing billions of coins. But die maintenance, especially in the early months of the shield reverse, faced unexpected challenges. The change from the Lincoln Memorial reverse to the shield meant fresh master dies and new hubs. This transitional phase saw minor alignment issues, particularly in some early runs. The coin in the collector's hand bore all the hallmarks of such a mishap, possibly a slightly rotated hub impression, leading to doubled design elements. Years later, a new twist emerged. A well-known numismatic researcher published a study on early shield cents, documenting several varieties and error subtypes. One variety matched the collector's coin almost exactly, except for a subtle difference. On the documented examples, the doubling was confined to e pluribus unum, while the collector's coin showed faint spreading on the numerals of the date as well. This anomaly made the piece even more unusual, possibly the result of a one-off die adjustment mid-production. What began as a common coin was now possibly the sole known example of a distinct die state. Offers began to come in, first $100, then $250. By the time the coin hit its fifth year in the collector's possession, a private buyer offered $500. Temptation wavered in the air, but the collector declined. Some coins become more than currency or investment, they become personal relics, milestones in a journey. Today, the 2010 double design shield cent remains elusive. Most people will never notice it, most will never care. But for those who understand its origins, it's a tangible reminder that even in an age of high-tech minting and strict quality control, imperfections slip through. And sometimes, those imperfections are worth far more than perfection itself. The collector still remembers that quiet evening, the hum of the refrigerator, and the glint of something slightly unusual in a sea of ordinary copper. In a way, that's the true value, knowing that at any moment, in any handful of change, history might be waiting for you to see it. In 2014, the familiar Lincoln cent rolled off the presses of the U.S. Mint in massive numbers, destined for pockets, jars, and change trays across the nation. Like every year since 1982, it was struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet, bearing the Union Shield reverse that had been introduced just 4 years earlier in 2010. The minting technology had grown more precise, faster, and more automated than ever, producing billions of coins annually. But perfection, in the world of mass production, is always a fragile illusion. Somewhere in that sea of copper brilliance, a small number of cents emerged carrying a defect that should never have passed quality control. It wasn't obvious to an untrained eye, yet it was enough to make a seasoned numismatist stop mid-breath. The error's origins were buried in the mechanics of the high-speed presses. A planchet slightly misaligned in the collar, or an over-polished die, or even an improperly prepared blank, any of these could produce something different, something unintended. That year, the Denver Mint in particular was running long production cycles to meet demand, and the combination of worn dies and hurried throughput allowed anomalies to slip through unnoticed. To most people, such a cent would be spent without a second glance. But to the right person, it was more than a cent, it was a puzzle begging to be solved. For Michael, a hobbyist coin collector from Minnesota, the moment came unexpectedly. He had been roll hunting for weeks, trading notes with other collectors online, looking for double dies, wide AM varieties, or misstrikes. One evening, sitting at his kitchen table under the yellow glow of an old desk lamp, he slid a pile of freshly opened pennies across his mat when one caught the light in a strange way. At first, he thought it was damage, maybe from circulation. But as he turned it slowly, the details began to tell a different story. The rim seemed unusually thick on one side, and the date appeared slightly stretched. Even stranger, part of the motto, "In God We Trust," looked faint, as if the die had barely kissed the surface. On the reverse, certain shield lines were weak and blurred, while others were sharp. It was as if the coin had been frozen mid-strike. He felt his heartbeat quicken, a sensation every collector knows when possibility begins to replace doubt. Michael fetched his loupe, hands trembling a little. Under magnification, the mystery deepened. The fields of the coin bore subtle ripples, evidence of a strike through grease, a type of mint error that occurs when debris clogs parts of the die, leaving incomplete impressions. But that wasn't all. The alignment between obverse and reverse seemed slightly rotated. It wasn't the dramatic, rotated die error that jumps out instantly, but a measurable deviation, something small enough to escape casual detection yet significant to specialists. The next day, Michael posted detailed photographs on a numismatic forum. Responses trickled in, some skeptical, others intrigued. One user, a veteran collector with decades of experience, commented that this combination of strike-through and rotation on a 2014 cent was exceptionally unusual. It wasn't a common mint blunder, and the consensus was that only a handful might exist. The theory forming among the group was that a partially misaligned collar combined with a debris-clogged die had produced these oddities in a very short production window before maintenance corrected the issue. At first, Michael had no thought of selling. The coin was a curiosity, a personal victory. But as word spread, he began receiving private offers, some modest, some surprisingly high. A few collectors warned him that error coins often take time to appreciate, and their market can be unpredictable. Yet the rarity, combined with its peculiar dual error nature, made it clear this cent was more than a common oddity. Months passed, and the coin's notoriety quietly grew. It was featured in a short segment of a regional coin club newsletter. Around that time, another collector reported finding a similar error, though with less rotation and a less pronounced strike-through. This second discovery, instead of diminishing the first, reinforced its significance, suggesting a micro-run of flawed coins. Auction houses began showing interest, and a well-known error coin dealer hinted that, in the right setting, it could bring in far more than initial offers suggested. The value trajectory was subtle at first. Early estimates placed it in the low hundreds, a respectable figure for a modern cent. But as examples failed to surface in quantity, projections climbed. It became one of those niche treasures that specialists whispered about, too new for the general public to care, yet rare enough to create tension between those who owned one and those who wanted one. By 2018, a similar 2014 cent with a single error sold at auction for $280. Collectors familiar with Michael's coin, possessing the double anomaly, speculated privately that it could reach triple that under the right conditions. The physical quirks of the coin were part of its charm. The obverse uneven pressure had created a gentle wave in the copper plating, something that became visible only when tilted at an angle. The rotation between sides was just enough to be measurable with a protractor, about 12 degrees off standard alignment. And the reverse strike-through gave the shield an almost ghostly fade, as if the die itself had momentarily lost its strength. These elements combined into a single piece that told a story not just of error, but of a specific, fleeting moment in the minting process when multiple factors converged. The twist came unexpectedly in 2021. While reviewing old mint production records, a researcher published an article suggesting that the Denver Mint that year had briefly experimented with modified collar dies for certain denominations, attempting to reduce planchet bounce during high-speed strikes. If the theory was correct, the misalignment seen in Michael's coin could have been partially due to this experimental hardware, an undocumented trial that the mint never acknowledged publicly. Whether coincidence or cause, the idea added a layer of intrigue. If true, the coin wasn't just a victim of random error, it was a witness to an unreported moment in minting history. By then, Michael had kept the cent for 7 years. Offers still arrived occasionally, some now exceeding $900. He found himself torn. Was it worth more as a story he could tell for the rest of his life, or as a sudden windfall to invest in other collecting goals? The coin sat in a slabbed holder, certified by a top grading service, the label neatly noting both errors. It remained, to him, a reminder of how the smallest details could open doors into the hidden, human side of a seemingly mechanical process. Some coins are rare because of age. Others are valuable because of metal content. But this 2014 cent belonged to a different category, its worth tied not just to scarcity, but to a chain of circumstances that could never be exactly repeated. Somewhere between billions of flawless strikes, the mint's machinery hiccuped, and in that fraction of a second, an object was born that would cross from the world of ordinary change into the quiet, charged realm of collectibles. And like so many treasures in numismatics, it wasn't made to be found, but for the right eyes, it couldn't hide forever. In 2017, the familiar Lincoln cent continued its long-standing reign in American pockets and purses. The year marked another chapter in the shield reverse design's relatively short history, having been introduced in 2010 to replace the Lincoln Bicentennial series. The composition remained the same since 1982, 97.5% zinc with a thin copper plating, struck at multiple mints across the country to meet the demand for billions of pennies. Production was high, the processes refined by decades of experience, and to most, it seemed improbable that any unusual coins could slip through the rigorous quality control of the U.S. Mint. Yet, as with many moments in numismatic history, perfection proved elusive. Somewhere in the hustle of planchets, dies, and presses, an error was born, subtle to the untrained eye, but glaring to a careful observer. It didn't appear with the pomp of a rare silver overstrike or a dramatic off-center strike. Instead, it was hidden in the tiniest imperfection, a feature so minute that countless people handled it without ever noticing. The nature of the 2017 error was that it could blend seamlessly into circulation, lying dormant among ordinary coins. This was not a mistake that leapt from a pile of change and announced itself. It had to be found, coaxed from obscurity, and recognized for what it truly was. And so, for months, perhaps years, it quietly traveled from cashier to customer, resting in coin jars, vanishing into vending machines, until fate placed it in the hands of someone who knew exactly what to look for. That person was a seasoned collector who had been searching rolls of pennies since childhood. By 2017, he'd examined hundreds of thousands of coins, each one a possibility. His hunt wasn't for wealth alone, but for the thrill of finding history where others saw none. On a quiet evening, armed with nothing more than a desk lamp and a magnifying loupe, he began sorting through another box of fresh bank rolls. One by one, the coins spun under his fingers, ordinary, predictable, until his eyes caught something strange on a cent fresh from its paper wrapper. At first glance, it was just another 2017 shield cent. But the date looked wrong. Not misaligned exactly, but the numbers seemed ever so slightly doubled, as if a shadow clung to their edges. He flipped the coin under the light, and the details of Lincoln's profile shimmered oddly, the edges of the letters on Liberty appearing thicker, less crisp than normal. His pulse quickened. Die doubling, if confirmed, could mean the coin was a double die variety, one of the most coveted kinds of mint errors. The mind of a collector moves quickly in moments like this. Was this a machine doubling, which would lower the excitement, or a genuine hub doubling, born in the die-making process itself? He reached for his microscope, the excitement tinged with caution. Under magnification, the contours of the doubling became more apparent, particularly on the date and the motto, "In God We Trust." The doubling was strong enough to be seen without extreme magnification but subtle enough to fool the casual viewer. From that moment, the coin's journey changed. It was no longer a mere penny, it was a story, a survivor of an imperfection that had slipped past the US Mint's layered safeguards. The collector carefully placed it in a protective holder, his thoughts already racing ahead. How many of these were out there? Was it a rare discovery, or could rolls upon rolls still be hiding similar examples? He began reaching out to fellow numismatists, sharing high-resolution images, gathering opinions. Some saw what he saw instantly, others were skeptical, urging him to submit it for grading to verify authenticity. The market has an unpredictable way of valuing such finds. At first, the coin's worth was hypothetical, a matter of speculation among collectors who love a mystery. But word began to spread. Online forums buzzed with images of similar 2017 cents, some with clear, dramatic doubling, others with fainter traces. Early sales on auction platforms were modest, a few dollars here, $20 there. Yet, as more collectors recognized the error's significance and verified examples were slabbed by grading services with specific, double die attributions, prices began to climb. Some sold for $50, others for well over $100, depending on the strength and clarity of the doubling. The progression was slow at first, like a tide creeping in unnoticed, and then, seemingly all at once, the market surged. The real intrigue lay in the twist. Not all 2017 double dies were created equal. There were subtle differences between them, tied to specific die pairs used at different mints. The collector's coin, as it turned out, came from a die with a particularly bold spread on the date and motto, one of the more dramatic examples known. This put it in a smaller, more desirable subset. For those deep in the hobby, the difference between a minor and major variety can mean the difference between a coin worth a few extra dollars and one fetching several hundred. Then came the unexpected revelation. Research into mint production records suggested that the error likely originated from a small batch of working dies made early in the production year. The implication was startling. This was not a mistake from the tail end of a worn die's life but from the very start, when the die was fresh, crisp, and capable of producing thousands of identical error coins before being retired or corrected. This meant that somewhere out there, entire rolls, perhaps even full bags of 2017 cents, might still contain examples of this exact double die. For collectors, that knowledge turned everyday pocket change into a potential treasure hunt. The original finder, watching the market and the chatter online, faced a choice: sell while demand was high, or hold, gambling that scarcity and time would push the value higher still. He chose the latter, adding the coin to his personal collection rather than cashing in immediately. The decision was not purely financial, it was emotional. This wasn't just a coin anymore, it was a trophy, a reminder of a night when patience, knowledge, and luck intersected. Over the years, as more examples surfaced and were sold, the coin's value did fluctuate. Some collectors lost interest when weaker varieties were discovered in greater numbers, slightly diluting the market's initial frenzy. Yet the strongest examples, those with sharp, dramatic doubling, retained their allure. Auction results told the story. One sold for $200 in pristine condition, another for $300 when two determined bidders refused to back down. Stories circulated of people pulling them from pocket change, their faces lighting up as they realized they'd stumbled onto something worth far more than a cent. Even now, the 2017 double die cent remains a fascinating chapter in modern error coinage. Its story blends the mechanical precision of minting with the unavoidable reality that no system is perfect. It highlights the persistence of collectors who search not for fame or fortune alone, but for the joy of discovery. And for that original finder, the coin is a quiet reminder that history isn't confined to ancient gold or silver. It can be hiding in the smallest, most ordinary objects, waiting for someone with the right eye to see it.